All right, so now this next question of mine relates a little bit to the past one. Because I'm going to ask you a kind of a strange fact. So here's the story. On March 25th, 1961, a group of peasants in a small town called Ishevsk in Russia saw a man fall from the sky.
Shit.
He was flailing his arms, kicking his legs. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't making a sound. His legs were just kind of buffeted by the wind. He fell, hit the ground, and they called a paramedic team to go and rescue him. My fact is that his name was Ivan Ivanovich, and he was the very first of only 4 people to ever actually died in space. That's my fact.
Oh, shame. 1961.
1961, yeah.
The lunar landing was early 60s, so...
So I'll place this in time for you.
Please,
I'll place this in time for you. This is just before Yuri Gagarin's successful... This is literally like a year before Yuri Gagarin's successful trip into space.
So were there some failures? Died in space, eh? Died in space. And he fell.
Yeah.
And his arms were flapping
like
about
literally
in a
loose,
village in
yeah.
Russia.
What happened was literally loose.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what's quite nice? Or is it? But it sounded like he's got a Russian name. It sounded like he took off from Russia, went to space, landed in Russia. I mean, what are the chances? a mathematician could work it out.
Yeah, I suppose it really depends. What if maybe he took off from Vladivostok and then this town of
But Russia's big.
Izevsk is like right near Moscow, maybe. You don't know.
He's not one of us. Kill him anyway. He's
No,
Russian.
but yeah, they called paramedics and
Gosh, this sounds so crazy. Died in space. How would they know? How would they bloody know? It's got to be a lie. It's got to be a lie.
So I'll tell you how they know. They knew. They were
Okay.
tracking. So the Space Center was tracking his heartbeat, and it stopped.
That's amazing. Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to say it's true because of that little sub fact you gave me. So they would have seen, oh, it's gone. It's left our atmosphere, despite what your previous fact might have said. It's left our atmosphere. They're in space. Oh, shit.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. We have to ignore my previous fact.
Yeah.
We have to use a more traditional understanding of our atmosphere.
And then yes, I'm going to say it's true. They realized he died in space. They must have ejected it, must have fallen apart because he just felt, this is too much for my brain. I have to make a decision, Yes, it's true.
Okay. So this incident, as I describe it, is absolutely true. People from the town, hang on. Don't get too excited. People from the town of Izevsk did in fact see a man falling from the sky, and they did in fact call paramedics, and a heartbeat had been tracked at the center. But what it was effectively a crash test dummy where they'd attached a heartbeat to him. But now what's interesting about this is his name, Ivan Ivanovich, started getting spread around the world, as in Russian space race astronaut dies, and the Russians astronauts, the cosmonauts are all dying, and Russia's hiding the deaths. But in fact, it was a crash test dummy. When the paramedics arrived and they discovered it was a dummy, one of them apparently punched him in the face. But yeah, so this Ivan Ivanovich as a name in Russia effectively translates to like Joe Blogs in England. So they'd named him this. But yeah, the West caught wind of the fact that a cosmonaut had fallen to Earth. And he'd been, they'd been tracking his heartbeat, and they were like, oh, shit, the Russians must be close to space now because this guy has died, and they're covering it up, and they're hiding the fact that, but they're at the point where they're sending men into space, they're throwing men up and into space.
And that might have been the reason that they hauled ass to get a man on the moon.
Well, they lose. So they lose. Well, the next year, Yuri Gagarin actually does make it to space. But yeah, essentially what happens is that this incident causes so many rumors to spread and so much stuff to spread that for years, I mean, even now, like there have been comprehensive books written on the history of the Russian space race and about how it's absolutely impossible. No cosmonauts were killed at that stage. This rumor persists that the Soviet government was recklessly throwing men into space because of this one particular incident. So it's historically this story has existed.
Yes, so
and
it
in that way,
depends
it's
how
true.
you phrased your fact. We'd,
Yeah,
we'd have to play back.
Well, I mean, the way I phrased it was I said that they watched a man fall from the sky, and they did not. They watched a crash test.
Did he have a winky?
They watched it. Apparently, he was very lifelike. They'd put eyebrows on him and eyelashes and all sorts of things. But yeah, so he he was unfortunately not a man. He was a crash test dummy. And this, but yeah, I mean, just as kind of a fact, you know, and as I say, more with a traditional view of what space is. Only 3 people have actually died in space. They were Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev.
All Russians,
Yeah,
eh?
yeah. So they were all in the same. They were on Soyuz 11 mission, and just before they had already kind of angled for re-entry, and just before they re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, the cabin decompressed and killed them all.
Oh,
So they are the only people to have died in
I
space
see.
officially, because it decompressed, and it was the decompression in space that killed them.
Oh, shame.
So, you know, so a lot of people say that when the Columbia returned in 2003 and then it broke apart, that's 7 astronauts who also died in space. But it's not, because the reason the Columbia broke apart was because one of the protective flaps kind of came off, and it was in fact the friction with Earth's atmosphere that caused it to break apart. So they died in Earth's atmosphere. These 3 died out in space. So they're the only 3 people that have ever died in space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then when you think, you know, that Apollo 13 mission, those guys could have died in space, assuming you believe that space doesn't, you know, that our Earth's atmosphere doesn't extend beyond the moon. But
Wow, man, that's a great fact. Shame. Crash test dummy, Ivan Ivanovich. So the joke's about the Russian. Ivan Ivanovich walks into a bar. He said,
yeah, there's like Joe Bloggs walks into a bar, you know, John Doe. It's that sort of a name in Russia. So that's why they called him Ivan Ivanovich.